Three, two, one. Kevin Caparosa, how are you?
Fine, fine.
Good. Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Your family has a pretty rich history in this county, but you were just telling me your family is not originally from here.
Well, my mother is originally from Wisconsin.
Okay.
And my dad was originally from Clairton. And my mom and my dad met during World War II.
Wow.
They were
Do you know
both,
how they met?
Actually, I do. It was pretty interesting. Okay, my mom was a Army nurse. My dad was she was a lieutenant, and my dad was a lieutenant in the Army.
Yeah.
And they met on a back then during the war, I guess, or back during that era. People like to double date. Okay. And my mom's best friend wanted to go out with this particular guy.
Sure.
But she needed somebody to double date with. And actually my mother was engaged to some young man back in Wisconsin. And so my mom really resisted the idea of going out on this date, okay? But her friend sort of convinced her, and the person that she met was my dad. And I guess a couple of days later, my dad called my mom up and asked her to go out on another date. And she promptly said no.
Yeah, I'm engaged.
Exactly. Okay. So it took a while for him to convince her to go out on a date. And, you know, I mean, the war was going on. So, you know, it wasn't like you could, you know, see somebody on a regular basis.
Right.
And the funny thing is at the end of the war, you know, not everybody got to go home at the same day. You know, they sort of like said this group can go home now, and
shift work, right?
Well, right, and you know, they would. So my dad actually got out of the military before my mother did.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. And what was interesting was her friend who sort of arranged this original date said, well, you will never see him again, okay, because the war's over. And next thing happened was he shows up still in the uniform, which was like definitely not kosher, okay? And he commanded some Jeep, and they went out on a date. So
so your dad's persistent, is that what you're saying?
Exactly, okay? And so after the war, you know, my mom went back to Wisconsin. My dad's here in Pennsylvania, in Clairton, and he sort of followed her up to Wisconsin. And because they were different religions, okay, I mean, my dad was Catholic and my mom was Presbyterian, okay, that was sort of different back then, okay, not common like now.
Right.
And so he had a quarter up in Wisconsin.
Wow. What led them back to, when they came back to PA, or when they came to PA, did they land in Butler, or did they go back to where your dad's from?
Well, I'm not sure exactly where the first town that they were in, but my dad was a shoe salesman. And so at one point he lived in Watertown, New York, which was famous for getting huge amounts of snow because they had the lake effect. And but I asked my mom and dad one time, how come you ended up in Butler? Because since nobody had a history here back then, I was told that for his accounts, this was sort of like the central spot, because he covered like parts of New York, probably little parts of Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and some of his bigger accounts, which was like Miller Shoes.
Sure.
Okay. Were located here in Butler.
That's so cool. Does the traveling shoe salesman exist anymore, or is that gone?
Probably, I mean, companies still have salesmen.
Sure.
So I would imagine to some degree it still exists, but especially with the internet now.
Sure.
Probably
not like the bringing the briefcase or the duffel bag with you and laying everything out and saying, all right, let's make a deal here, Miller Shoes type of thing.
Well, you know what? One of the stories I remember that my dad told me was there was a particular bad winter to where nobody could go anywhere. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like the current situation where we're with COVID, everybody was like in a lockdown situation, and he worked the phones. Okay, naturally there was no computers back then.
Just kind of cold calling.
Well, he already had a basis with the people. He knew his customers. My dad was a very people person.
Sure.
Okay. You could meet him and you sort of felt like you knew him forever.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was my dad.
That's cool. So how does he go from shoes to the bowling industry?
Well, I'm not sure what the moment was, but he ended up doing the shoes and the bowling at the same time for many years.
And those kind of go together. You have bowling shoes. Like, okay.
Yes.
I see the connection here.
So he had downtown Butler across from Penn Theater.
Yeah.
Where the pool table hall used to be up on the second floor.
Okay.
That was a business he bought, and it was called Penn Lanes. And I think he bought it around 1954. Mm-hmm. And Penn boys would have actually have worked for him, where they would have literally set the pins by hand. And I'm not sure. I don't recall ever being in there. But in 1956, there was like a technological change in the bowling industry to where they had gone from pin boys to automatic pin setters. And that was one of the things about my dad was he was not afraid to try new things. Okay.
Risk taker?
Yes, he was. He was. I always felt he was like ahead of the pack on a lot of ideas early on. Okay. Even later on when he built his first restaurant and he had a bar, he actually bought the very first automatic bar in the U.S.
What do you mean automatic bar?
It was where you press a button and a drink would come out.
Huh. Really?
Yes. The very first one in the whole country he bought.
That's amazing.
And it was here in Butler. So,
I can't believe I'm just figuring that out now. It's crazy.
Yes. I mean, so he has sort of like big shoes to fill in the sense of he did this, he did that.
Sure.
Yeah, he did a lot of things before it was like cool to do.
Right.
Okay.
But I'm sure in risk taking and being a businessman, that's how he was able to build so many of these businesses.
Exactly.
Like you have to be able to take a level of risk if you want to succeed in a big way, right?
Well, yes, and some things work, some things don't.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
It's just like life. Okay. But he was not hesitant. A lot of times, his accountants would say, "Don't do this, don't do that." That's not a good idea. But I hate to say it, a lot of times he still did it, and then he ended up in some of these cases proved him wrong, and proved him wrong in a big way.
Sure. So did he find his initial bowling alley? He found that profitable enough to then go into you mentioned restaurants. Did he go next into restaurants while simultaneously owning the bowling alley, or?
Well, in 1956. He rented some space on Hanson Avenue, 80 Hanson Avenue, and that was called Bowlaway Lanes. And he had some partners, He had over the years he had probably like at least 3 or 4 partners down there. But one in particular I remember was Bob Morrow, and Bob was great. Okay, Bob would be he was not only a great bowler, okay, and he also had that personality that the customers liked. But Bob was able to work, let's say, the bowling center during the week, and my dad, who was the traveling salesman, he would be gone like Monday through Friday, and then my dad would come and work the weekends. Okay, so they had a great relationship, okay, for many, many years, and that contributed a lot to their success, because my dad, to be honest, he worked 7 days a week.
Right.
Okay. I mean, he was one of technically 8 kids.
Wow. Okay.
And the first 2 kids ended up dying from the 1918 pandemic.
Okay.
His 2 older sisters that he never got to meet. So.
Wow. So he's building these businesses, you're saying, in the 50s. From, obviously I wasn't around then, but from history that I know about this county, the 50s and 60s, Butler was booming pretty heavily. It was growing. People were moving here. Businesses were starting left and right. So he also was, I don't know if lucky is the word, but the timing was good for him.
Yes, yes. He was in the right place at the right time. But like a lot of things, you have to be able to open that door. You have to be able to see that this is an opportunity that awaits you. Okay, if you don't open the door, you're not going to be able to walk through it. Okay, and he was willing to take that risk.
Sure.
Okay,
that's cool. So you really grew up around these businesses then?
Exactly.
Do you remember being young and working at a young age with him?
Well, to be honest, we probably started really early, okay? And when I say really early is we probably started like before we were age 10.
Working?
Well, and we did simple things.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we did simple things, okay, to where...
That's cool.
People have left, wipe the table down, pick up the trash, all that kind of stuff, okay? So my dad's philosophy was he kept us busy, okay? And especially years later when we had the restaurant, it was not uncommon for the entire family to be down there working, okay? Including my mom. And, like my brother Joe, he would help cook. I would help do dishes. Some of my older sisters would be serving. Okay. Yeah. My dad would be working the floor. I mean, it was always like a big family affair. Okay. To where everybody was expected to chip in.
Sure. And I'm sure with how much he was doing, with how much your family was doing, that was almost necessary.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
In order to make it, especially when you start off without much.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, my dad, he lost his dad when he was young. Okay. So my grandmother, raised the 6 remaining kids by herself.
Right.
And they probably had difficult times.
Sure.
Because, they went through the Depression. I mean, my dad was born in 1920. So he definitely lived through the Depression. And, they ended up sending my uncle, who actually became a famous ear surgeon. He was the only one that I believe that really went to college initially. Okay, my dad ended up going to college after the war. He attended some classes and so forth to get some business training.
What about bowling because you've been around this industry for years. What about bowling brings people together? Bowling consistently is just a staple in our country. Why is that, in your opinion?
Well, it's sort of like a way of getting together with people, okay, and in a very relaxed atmosphere. Back when my dad first started, basically his primary customer were leagues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. People would bowl in a league. They would, it'd be like their night out. Back in when my dad first started in the original Bowlaway, okay, there was no liquor license, so people could bring in their own beer, so forth. We didn't have a kitchen; they could bring in their own food, so forth. It's a way of going out, having a good time now, more for open bowling. You go out with your friends, you have a relaxing night. It's just one of the few things that, I think that you can do as a big group, or not a big group, but a small group, and that people are familiar with.
Yeah. And we see how it's supported a family for generations at this point.
Yes.
So when did you guys open up Family Bowlaway? Was that your dad? Was that you and your brother?
Well, there's been a whole bunch of changes over the year. Okay. As I said, my dad first started with Penn Lanes in 54. I believe he closed that down in 1956. And then that was the Bowlaway lanes. Now, then somewhere in the 60s, he built Bowlaway Annex, which is actually where Tanglewood Senior Citizen Center is.
Okay, not too far from where you guys are now.
Exactly. It was just right up the hill from Bowlaway. At that point, it was a bowling center and a small bar. My dad had ownership in some other bowling centers. Paul and Ann's, which was now Majestic Lanes down on Rite 8.
Yep.
He was a partner with Paul Papera, who owned that.
Was he kind of also a consultant at that point too, being in the bowling business for so long at that point?
Well, I mean, he brought things to the table that maybe some other people wouldn't have because of his experience. He was a partner with Shenango Bowl over in Newcastle. But over time, he sold his interests in the things that were not in Butler. Okay. So then in the 70s, there was a fire at the original Bowlaway Annex. And at that point, like a lot of things go in cycles.
Sure.
Okay. That was sort of a down cycle for bowling at that time. It coincided. And the decision was made to remove the lanes, which, to be honest, I can't remember how many lanes they had there. And that was really like the beginning of what I would call the original 11th frame.
Okay.
Okay. Now you have this big space where there were lanes at.
Yep.
So he made them into banquet rooms. He added a big kitchen and so forth.
Event center type of place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And back then, to be honest, people used to drive, as weird as this sounds, we used to have customers drive in from Ohio and West Virginia to come listen, because we had a lot of bands back then.
Yeah,
they
cool.
would come in for the bands. They'd come in for the dancing. They'd come in for the dinner. Okay.
Yeah.
There weren't, like I said, he was sort of ahead of his time on a lot of this thing, and that was one of the things. Okay.
Sure.
And then unfortunately, fire struck again. Okay.
Oh,
and he rebuilt it. But there wasn't as much enthusiasm from him on this endeavor.
Well, having to start over multiple times because of the same reason, that's tough.
Well, yes, and the second time he actually got hurt. Okay. My dad was very hands-on. Okay, and he actually fell through the roof when they were rebuilding, and he shattered his hip, and that had a big effect on him.
Yeah.
Okay, so at that point, after he sold the 11th frame, which would have been the original Bowlaway Annex, he was really down to just a 16-lane center. And then I believe it was like 1978, my brother joined my dad, and they were running the Bowlaway, the original Bowlaway, which was 80 Hanson Avenue. And at the same time, they had other properties going on. They had apartments up in Slippery Rock. They had apartments here in town that they all took care of. And in 1983, which was about 5 years after my brother joined my dad, they thought about getting out of bowling. Okay. And there was another center up on Route 8. It was called Family Lanes. They wanted to get out of bowling more than my dad and my brother. So they basically contacted them and basically made a proposal for, why don't you buy my establishment, move your lanes up to where we're at, okay? At that point, Center Township was hopping, okay? Clearview Mall had just been built.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, there was a lot of momentum to that part of Butler.
Sure.
That was like the hot spot of town, okay? And so they added on to Family Lanes, and they basically moved some of the lanes that they had there on Hanson Avenue up to Family Lanes.
They physically moved the lanes, you're saying?
They physically moved the lanes, okay, up there.
Wow.
And that was 1983.
What's that process like?
Well, all that equipment is heavy.
Yeah.
All that equipment is heavy.
Sure.
And my brother Joe is probably one of the best mechanics ever, okay? You know, he understands how all that stuff works, and there's you know, at least 30,000 parts on each pin setter. And those pin setters were made in 1956 that he moved.
Those are the original ones.
They're the original ones, okay? And the lanes are extremely heavy.
Sure.
So they moved the lanes. They moved everything, okay? At that point in time, I was working for Bethlehem Steel, oil and gas division, and I was out in Texas living. Okay. And just like Boeing, you know, oil and gas industry goes up, it goes down. And the oil industry was going down at that point. And the company that I worked for, Bethlehem Steel, transferred me to Ohio. And I had this huge, massive territory of, from New York City to Chicago was my territory. Okay.
And so you were traveling a decent amount at that point too.
Exactly. Okay. And basically, you know, my brother Joe reached out to me and he said, look, he says, would you like to go in business together? And we could be equal partners. So I thought about it for a little while, and, you know, I was putting in a tremendous amount of hours on this travel. Yeah. So I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to work that many hours, I'm going to maybe work for myself.
Sure. For
that many hours, okay?
And had your dad exited the business at this point, or was he leaving the business at this point?
He had sold the business. Sold the business to my brother.
Gotcha.
A few years before that. But the thing in our family, even though he sold it, he's still
around.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. He still had his say in how thing. You got to understand an Italian father, okay?
I have one. I understand.
Okay, so it was like he was always there, always giving his 2 cents, and you know he had all that experience, okay, and so I ended up leaving Bethlehem, and I joined my brother in 1984. So at that point, we had 28 lanes. We were in at Family Lanes. We were in a rental situation. Okay. Steichner's family owned the building.
Okay.
And they're super nice people. And we ended up seeing a need for some more lanes in the Butler area. At that point, bowling was on an upswing. Okay. And at that time also it was a major event in the bowling industry in the sense of computerized scoring had just started coming out to where people did not have to manually keep scoring.
Right.
Okay. And we saw
much less cheating that way too.
Well, exactly. Sure. Yeah. And we saw an opportunity to where if you're one of the first to do that in your market,
that's a draw.
Some people will say, I would rather bowl there.
Yeah.
Than bowl where I'm at now.
Right.
So we wanted to be the leader, okay? And so we did scoring at our center shortly after I got there, like a year later.
I would think that would be a pretty steep financial investment.
Yes.
For just even it being a new technology at the time. I mean, is that how do you come to that decision? Obviously wanting to take a risk just like your dad would do, right? Let's be the leader, let's be ahead of the pack, but like financially, are you like, well, this better work? Well,
yes. I mean, our dad was great in helping us, okay? A lot of times, to be honest, he would front the money.
Yeah.
Okay. And then once the project was done and you had an exact tab, then we would go, my brother Joe and I would go to the bank, and then we would borrow that, and then we would pay our dad back.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we got the automatic scoring, and then we saw a need for some more lanes. But because automatic scoring had not been out there that long, there was not like a huge market for used automatic scoring. Okay. And we wanted to add lanes, but we didn't want to, as you said, go into a lot more debt. Okay. So I actually came across an ad in one of the bowling journals to where this bowling center had 12 lanes and they had automatic scoring and they wanted to sell everything. The only problem was they were in Nebraska. Okay. So we contact them, and we wanted to make sure that what we were buying was good stuff.
Sure.
Because once you buy it, it's sort of like it's yours.
Sure. And you got to get it back home.
And we have to get it back home, so forth. So our family's been very good friends with a sort of a local company that is actually travels worldwide. It's called All American Bowling, and the owner of the company flew with us out to Nebraska, and we looked at the equipment, and we ended up making an offer which they accepted. But they needed to finish their bowling season, so we had to naturally wait until like April, May. And then my brother Joe and a crew that he took dismantled everything, and they put it on 3 tractor trailers, and they shipped everything back to Butler. Well, the problem was I was at the receiving end, okay? And they would fill up one tractor trailer, send it, fill up the next tractor trailer, send it, and then they would literally get the last stuff in. And they had those things. My brother had that stuff packed so tight. I mean, you couldn't get anything else in that tractor trailer. He rolled everything up and shoved it in there. So, we didn't have a building to put them in yet.
Yeah.
Okay. And that started the process of, okay, now we have this equipment.
Right.
We wanted to, one thought was to buy the building that we're in and add on.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the problem was there wasn't a lot of land there. Okay, there wasn't a lot of land, and so we would have to like buy the house next door, knock the house down, take down the hill,
sure,
all that kind of stuff. And my dad,
that project would start 5 other projects for you.
Yes, everything would mushroom. Okay,
right.
So my dad had property. He actually had a mobile home park, and back then it was quite large. And he was willing to sell my brother and I the property, and he was willing to remove certain number of trailers for us to be able to eventually build a building there. Well, we had that Fairground Hill Road is very steep, so we had to spend like, I don't know, 6 to 9 months just moving dirt to level it out so we could put a building in.
Right.
Okay. And the back end of the building was sitting on like bedrock. So we actually had to blast part of the back end out. And, all that stuff makes things complicated because, like the school was concerned that the vibration might cause a break in their pool, that would cause a crack, because the vibration's going through.
Sure,
so we had to do a lot of special stuff to make sure that we didn't damage somebody else's property.
Right.
Even though there really weren't like houses near us, there was other concerns that we needed to take care of. So we ended up buying all this equipment, and we probably had it in storage for close to 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so going from the time that we bought the equipment to literally collecting the first dime, we had to pay on this for 5 years. We had it in storage.
Yeah. At that point, too, was the technology growing quickly? So that when you bought it, it was newer technology. 5 years in, is it becoming obsolete because newer ideas are coming out with digital?
Well, the difference was, yes, technology keeps moving.
Sure.
But back then, it didn't move as fast as it moves now.
Sure, no doubt.
As now, okay? So we were able to get a lot of use out of that equipment.
Good, yeah.
Okay. Basically, on the scoring equipment, to be honest, we got like 9 years.
Okay.
Okay. Most people don't have computers that are 9 years old.
Not at all.
Okay. And we had it for 5 years before that. So that stuff was basically 14 years.
Wow, yeah.
And, but then because we were going to be in Butler Township, back then, Center Township, where Family Lanes was at, was a dry township. You had no options for having a liquor license.
Really?
But Butler Township did. And back then, the liquor licenses were restricted to the municipality. Meaning, like, if there was an establishment in the city of Butler, it had to stay in the city of Butler.
Sure.
Okay. If it was in Butler Township, it had to stay in Butler Township.
Okay.
It was only years later that they changed the rules to where a liquor license could move anywhere in the county, but it has to stay in the county. Okay. So there are still restrictions, but they're much broader than what we were.
Like a county gets a certain number of licenses.
Yes. Per population.
Right. That makes sense.
So we had to acquire a liquor license. And there was a place at the Greater Butler Mark that had gone bankrupt, and we had to go into bankruptcy court, and we had to compete against another entity to buy that license, and then we had to put it in storage. And we bought not only the license, but we bought all the equipment.
Right.
And then, we were like, all this stuff we were acquiring, our local, which is now Next Tier Bank, they were like doing some upgrades. So we bought like their night deposit box system.
Yeah.
We put that in storage. We had stuff everywhere. Okay. Until we were able to build our new building, which we opened in August of 1992.
Okay.
So at that point, when we put everything together, we went from a 16 lane at Bowlaway to 28 lanes up at Family Bowlaway, because we combined the word family and Bowlaway.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. And then when we moved in 92, we went to 40 lanes.
Yeah.
Now, what was really interesting for the county was Butler County never had the state tournament. And a lot of times it would go like east to west. One year it would be the eastern part of the state. Next year it would be the western part of the state. Or maybe the third year it was like the central part of the state. And it was like a fair system to where it wouldn't just stay at one place. Okay. Well, you had to have a minimum 32 lanes. Prior to us building, nobody had 32 lanes. We were the biggest at 28. And then when we jumped from 28 to 40, then that allowed Butler County to actually compete and try to win this tournament.
Right.
Okay. And what that meant to Butler County was roughly 9,000 bowlers back then, 9 or 10,000 bowlers would come to the county.
Wow.
And it would be spread out over 11 weekends.
That's great for the economy too.
Yes. Well, dollars and cents back then, it was basically $3 million. Wow. And Butler County has some pretty neat events. We got the Jeep Festival, but that's like a week or a weekend. Okay. You have, stuff out at the Moraine State Park. You have the fair. You have this. But it's not spread out over 11 weekends.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
You can have a huge event that overwhelms the area. And you can't, if you live there, you can't get a hotel room. You can't get
That's right.
You can't get a seat at a restaurant.
It does kind of like disrupt for a week, and then it's okay. It brings money in, but like it kind of disrupts everything for a week.
See,
and then just
when
leaves.
you have 9,000, you're spreading them out.
Sure.
Literally, we were filling back then. We were filling every hotel room.
Wow. Yeah.
In the county for 11 weekends in a row.
Wow.
Okay. So it brought a lot to the area. Okay. And it didn't overwhelm the area at one thing. And since then, we've had the tournament a total of 3 times.
Is it still a yearly thing for the Pennsylvania? I've never even heard of this tournament. So
yes.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's been around a long time. I'm not sure how many years it's been, but it's been around a long time.
Is it tough to host?
Well, it's sort of like tough to win.
Sure.
The rights to hosting. We were scheduled to have it come to Butler County in 2021, basically next year. What did happen is because of COVID, the site that was supposed to have it this year, this is like the first time probably since maybe World War I that they canceled the tournament.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. And as a result, the location that was supposed to have it this year is now going to have it next year.
Bumping it, yeah.
So we've been bumped to 2022.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now, we're also going to be one of the sites for the Canadian American first responders
games. Yes, I've heard about this.
They came through and
and how crazy is it that Butler County's hosting that? Out of all the places.
I mean, you got to admit the county commissioners did a wonderful job, because we were competing against somewhere in South Carolina, like Charleston or something like that. And they felt, from what I was told, that there's enough neat things going on in Butler County that it made them vote our way.
In your opinion, being a business owner in this county, is Butler trending upward when it comes to again, we're talking about, exciting things going on. We're hosting events. We're opening different businesses. You've been around Butler for a while. Are you seeing a trend in a good direction in this county?
Absolutely. I think, the tourism, the chamber, okay. I think the county commissioners, I believe all of them are first rate. Okay, and they are doing things out of the box. Okay, they are doing things that my dad would be like happy with.
How cool
is
that?
Because nobody has done this. Okay, and you got to get creative. One of the things my dad got creative, and a lot of people don't know this, unless you have a family member. Back in the 50s. My dad created the very first Special Olympic bowling program in the country.
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
And, Special Olympics technically I don't think came about till 1960.
More in the 60s, yep.
68, okay?
Yeah.
He had it in 1956.
Wow.
12 years. Now, I wish we had it, but we don't. He had actually received a letter from Eunice Shriver, the founder of Special Olympics.
Right. Wow.
In the 60s, saying that he had the oldest program in the 60s.
Yeah.
Okay? And this is an ongoing program. Okay? We still do it.
How cool.
COVID has sort of shut it down for a little while.
Sure.
Okay, but there's nowhere in the country that has a program older than
That's
ours.
awesome, man. What a legacy.
Yes.
That from your dad to you, and the fact that, I would imagine that program will continue once things open up again, but what a legacy that is. That's so cool.
Another big event in the bowling industry was bumper bowling.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, bumper bowling allowed a lot of little kids that might not have enough oomph to get the ball down the lane, could get the ball down the lane now because they would hit the bumpers. Okay?
Sure.
My brother Joe invented a periscope because when you have the scoring, you send like a little signal that the ball has crossed this beam of light.
Yeah.
Well, when they came out with bumper bowling, that bumper blocked the eye for it to see. Okay, so my brother came up with, we called it the periscope, to where the light would come out of the device that Brunswick had, and it would go in there, and then he had a series of mirrors that would bend it, get it up over the bumper to the other, make the connection on the other side of the lane and back. Okay, and for a number of years, when they still had the blow-up bumpers, okay? When they did away with blow-ups and they did the mechanical bumpers, you didn't really need that equipment. But for many years, out of the back of the bowling center, he and his some of his staff back there were producing these bumpers, not bumpers, but these mirrors that you would put on your lanes, and you could bend the light and you could get it over.
How cool, man.
So, I thought that was pretty cool on his part.
That's awesome.
I mean, Joe's pretty darn smart.
That's awesome. Speaking of staff, how many staff members do you have at the bowling center?
Well, right now we don't have a lot.
Sure.
But
typically.
Well, between the bowling center and the restaurants, we probably average between 60 to 65. Before COVID?
Yeah. What's it like being, in a way, right, being responsible financially and as an employer? What's it like kind of holding that responsibility for 65 families?
Well, back in March when we did the shutdown, okay, it was really hard. Yeah. Okay, because, geez, you have like 65 families depending upon you, to some degree. Okay, I mean, a lot of our people do work part time, but
sure,
but still, it's something that I would not want to go through again.
Sure.
Okay. Now, we in like you say, the darkest days of the COVID, which would be the second half of March and beginning of April.
Into April, yep.
Okay, we were really down to just like a handful. We, I had my manager, which is Andy Heversey, and he's been with us for many, many years. He's great. Okay, Hannah Bruzel, she's in charge of our sales and marketing. We kept our head person in the kitchen. Okay, we weren't allowed to sell any drinks, so I couldn't really have much of the bartending staff.
Sure,
we had to get creative on trying to how to. We have 40 beers on tap,
right?
But initially, how do you sell that? And actually, my mother indirectly gave me the idea, and my mom's 98. Okay,
okay,
and my mom loves drinking Marburger iced tea.
Yeah.
So I'm up there visiting her, and I realized, geez, that's a jug that sort of is local. So I reached out to Marburger Dairy, and I said, hey, the jugs that you use, can I buy those? And then that way, if somebody, we didn't have growlers, which a lot of the brew houses have growlers. We just don't have a history of people taking the beer out of our establishment. They normally come and they want to stay, do an activity or just, chill out at our place, okay? But we really don't have a history of people removing beer, taking it home. So we had to get creative. And I contacted Marburger Dairy. And I drove down to Evans City, and they sold me like this whole pallet of these plastic jugs and caps.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we were starting able to, because what do? You have 40 beers on tap. You're not allowed to really have customers in the building. The stuff's going to go bad.
Yeah.
Eventually. I mean, luckily all of our stuff was fresh when we did the shutdown.
Okay.
And you have, you have a reasonable period of time to sell the things, okay? And then before we opened up, actually, the brewery took back any kegs that we had not tapped. It was wonderful.
Right.
Because we thought for sure that was going to be stuff we would have to toss.
Sure.
Okay. And it made a big difference because we, like a lot of businesses, we went through everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't a dime left in the building. And we went to credit cards.
Yeah.
Because I have a really wonderful lady that works in the office. She normally does the counting. Well, she's in her 70s. Okay. So she would be susceptible. Her husband was having chemotherapy.
Right.
I didn't want to get her exposed to anything. Okay. So it was only this week that we went back to where you could do cash every night of the week.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when could you guys officially open back up again?
Well, the bowling center wasn't open until the last Tuesday in July.
Okay. Wow.
Even though we were allowed to open, the issue that was going on was when you went into the shutdown, and then we got some PPP money. Thank God for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and you could start bringing people back. What do you do with people that you're not allowed to open?
Sure.
Okay, it's not like people can work remotely, for bowling. Okay, for the bar, the restaurant, you can't. We could bring back a few people, but we weren't selling a lot of takeout. Okay, because we just didn't have a history of takeout. People just didn't think of us in that manner, which I get.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had to come up with projects. Okay. The government says you need to bring back as many people as you can and spend this money in 8 weeks. Okay. So we started looking at this needs done and that could get done. And it was a lot of projects that were very hard to do if we were not shut down. Okay, so one of the first we did was in the kitchen. Okay, there was an issue with a drain that had gone on since day one. We decided, you know what, we're going to fix that.
Yeah.
But in order to fix that, we have to saw cut the floor. We have to jackhammer the cement up. We got to get a plumber in there.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's messy. Okay, you can't be like serving dinners.
Sure.
You know, when that part of the building is all cut up. So we ended up. I contacted a tile company in Ohio that we had bought the original tile from, and so actually I put some of my cooks worked with me, and we literally did all this, retile, you know, tore up the whole floor.
Good for you guys.
Put down this, laid all this ceramic tile.
Yeah.
I mean, most of my staff had never laid a tile ever,
Right.
but by the time that they were done, they were pretty good.
They know now, yeah.
That was one project, and then the second one was we knew based on what we saw on TV that there was going to be a big movement for outside. You know, people are going to want to be cautious. And the one thing that we are really blessed with is we got a lot of space. We have a big building inside, and we have a huge piece of property. So the idea was, let's go outside. Okay. And it was probably like maybe the third or the fourth week into the shutdown that we had one of those eureka moments.
Sure.
To where we realized, look, we need to do this outside. What do we need to do in order to get this accomplished? And the very first thing we realized was, well, if you want to serve a beer outside, you have to have that piece of property licensed. Okay? So we reached out to the LCB for the state of Pennsylvania. And actually, very quickly, we submitted an application. They informed us that it's a 30-day process, okay? But they didn't know if it was going to take more than 30 days because even their staff in Harrisburg was pretty limited
Right.
as to who was coming in and so forth. So they were honest with us. They said it normally takes 30 days, but it could take longer because of what's going on. We're right next to the school property. You know, they have to send out letters to all the property owners. And to be honest, the only property owner is pretty much the Butler School District.
Right.
And we have a long history program with them.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, very good rapport with them. And so 30 days came, 30 days went, and we got our approval from the state. Okay. And then in the meanwhile, we had built these 7 cabanas. Yeah. And they're like spaced like 20 feet apart. So it's way beyond the 6 foot
sure.
You know, social distancing that they say is the minimum. Okay. We actually licensed 16,000 square feet. Okay. Now, if you use the 6 foot square, 6 feet distance as a rule of thumb, that 16,000 square feet could technically hold 400 people, over 400 people.
Right.
So, we knew people were not going to be squished together. But at the same time, we felt people needed to get out. They're going to have cabin fever. They're going to be sort of going a little bonkers at home.
Sure.
Okay. But at the same time, we felt you would feel comfortable with your family and maybe your immediate friends. You probably don't feel comfortable with somebody you don't know. So the idea was to create this space to where you could have a private area and the next table was far away from you, and they had their private area, and everybody would have their own private area, okay? So we built 7 cabanas. We actually fenced it in. We built these big, massive gates, and initially, you know, we did all this ourselves pretty much.
Yeah.
And we built these gates so big that we had to like scale them back a little bit because they probably weighed like 1,000 pounds, and it was too much weight. So then we had to take some stuff off of it.
Yeah.
And then we, you know, I call them our King Kong doors. You know, that I bought them from King Kong on eBay because it sort of reminded me from like Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
A set of doors like that. And there's technically it's 4 doors. But we had to have that because in case of a fire truck needs to get through, we had to have a drive lane big enough that a vehicle could get in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were a bunch of rules that we had to, you know, follow.
Yeah.
And make sure that we were doing right because, you know, you don't want anybody to get hurt.
Sure.
Okay, so we were doing all this sort of on the fly, okay, and, you know, you couldn't ask anybody to come and give their opinion because nobody was going out anywhere. Mm-hmm. So we had to do a lot of this by phone.
Man, that's but again, you have continued kind of this forward thinking, right? Mm-hmm. Being a visionary, leading in certain directions, especially in business. Where as we kind of close the show out here, what does your business look like in 5 years? What vision do you have for the future? Are you guys looking to expand? Do you guys want more locations? What do you foresee happening?
Well, I don't see us ever going to another location.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. But the business has changed over time.
How so?
You know, in 92 when we opened, we were 40 lanes. Okay. And as I said a couple of times, you know, things go up, they go down. Mm-hmm. Okay. Bowling has changed. There's not as many league bowlers. Open bowling is more popular than league bowling was, okay, or is. So there wasn't as much need for as many lanes, okay? And we thought about this for many, many years, okay? We decided we were going to remove some lanes. Mm-hmm. You know, what's old is new again.
Sure.
Okay. So we opted to remove 12 lanes. So we were going to go back to what we had, the number of lanes that we had at Family Bowlaway up on Route 8.
Yeah.
Okay. And we decided, you know, sort of to take a playbook from my dad.
Yeah.
Okay. And we would create a event space. And, you know, Joe and I, you know, we had some pretty hefty discussions as to how much space. Mm-hmm. We have a good friend. His name's Jeff Double, okay?
Yeah.
And he has a lot of experience with, like, events. And we brought him in, and, you know, we were asking for, like, okay, if somebody wanted to do a wedding or a wedding reception or something like that, how many people? And so we had to do a lot of this what if as to if you wanted to seat this many people, how much room do you have to have, okay? And at the same time, we were still trying to stick with the bowling, you know, part of our roots. We were trying to combine 2 different elements, okay? In 2014, we redid our bar restaurant, and we incorporated a whole bunch of new things, you know, brick walls, some nice wood.
Yeah.
You know, we stayed local with all that kind of stuff, and we wanted to take some of those aspects from the 11th frame into this new area. And this new area, we named it the back alley. Okay, one of my staff members came up with that, and but at the same time, we wanted to incorporate some activities.
Sure.
A lot of times people go to places and they go there and maybe they sit, they eat, maybe they watch some TV, okay, and they drink, Okay. We wanted to push the envelope to where not only could you do that, but then you could do activities.
Yeah.
Do activities that would be hard to do, let's say, at home.
Right.
Okay. We wanted to give reasons for why people want to come to our place, make it more a destination. Okay. So we knew we wanted to put duck pin machines in.
Super fun, by the way. I've gone to 2 events in the back alley. Awesome.
Okay. Well, great.
Awesome.
Well, Joe and I, we believe in going to see places.
Yeah.
Okay. This is part of our philosophy. We go and we see, and I read. Okay.
Yeah.
So there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about this. It's called foaling. Okay. And it's where you take a football and you throw it at bowling pins.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's huge in Detroit. That's where it started. Well, this article talked about this guy, you know, coming up with this concept. He would go and tailgate at the Indianapolis 500, and they would set up these things, and they would play, you know, during the weekend, I guess. So I was really like, I actually drove up to Detroit, went to see it. It was pretty neat. Okay. So my brother Joe was pushing for bocce.
Mm-hmm.
I was pushing for this foaling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we both agreed on the duck pins.
Yeah.
Okay. The problem was there looked like there wasn't enough space for all 3 if it was configured the normal way. Then we ended up going to a place that's wonderful in Columbus, Ohio, called Pins Mechanical. And that was the first time we saw short lanes.
Mm.
Okay, to where instead of them being the traditional 60 feet lane, these things were a lot shorter. You didn't need bowling shoes. You have these tiny little balls, okay, duck pin balls, and we had one of those eureka moments that, look, we can have our cake, we can eat it too, because now we can have take up shorter space for the duck pins. We could still have Joe's bocce, and we could still have Kevin's foaling.
Yeah.
The only problem was with foaling, they trademarked the name.
Okay.
So we couldn't use the name. We can't use their rules, you know, things like that.
Sure.
So actually, one of my employees came up with the name Pigskins and Pins, which, to be honest, I like that. To me, is a lot more descriptive of what you're doing.
I like that more
than foaling. Okay,
yeah.
So
you guys should trademark that, man.
Well, you know what? You're about the 10th person that have said that. And I should.
Right.
But so we started this process of, okay, we in our building there's like a pole at every 10 lanes. So normally it would have been natural for you to have a wall at the pole.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once we decided we wanted this room to be convertible in the sense that the pigskins and pins, you could remove those. Okay, you could remove the bocce courts. The only thing you can't really remove is the duck pin lanes, the 3 lanes.
I'll tell you what. When I was there for it was for like a 50th birthday party. They had rented out the whole space. Where Pigskins and Pins is, they had live music. They had tables set up for. There was a dancing area. Like it was well done.
Well, this space is so easily convertible. Okay?
That's cool. Yeah.
We had one group that had tables there, and once they were done, they wanted that back into the Pigskins and Pins. Matter of 10 minutes, we were able to convert it from seating to the Pigskins. Okay, so this started this whole process, and to be honest, as weird as this sounds, a lot of our concepts are in our head. Okay, we have like the walls going here and the electricals going here. That we have on paper, but everything else is sort of like, let's put something over there. Let's see what it was going to look like. So when my brother removed the 12 pin setters, we had these 12 pin setters sitting outside in our parking lot because we had to get them out of the building. Well, then we actually saw a picture. The first item we had created, we actually took somebody else's idea. I wish it was ours, but there's a place in Los Angeles that took the moving deck out of pin setters and they created chandeliers. We saw that and we thought, wow, that is so neat.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate here in Butler. There's a lot of talent here in Butler. There's the families, the Warheights. Matt Warheight's the father, and Jeff is one of the sons. And they have a metal shop that we could take these parts, we could give them the idea as to what this needs to look like, and they could turn a napkin into a real product. Okay. And the father, Matt, created the chandeliers, and then the son followed up on. We've taken almost every part off of a pin setter and we've created things.
So
we've
cool.
repurposed things. Okay. Instead of throwing everything away, which is what most bowling centers do when they remove equipment, because there's not a market for these pin setters.
Sure.
Okay. There's just too many pin setters out there, but bowling parts are super neat in that they're different.
Yeah.
And if you use some imagination, you can create something out of them. So between the bowling center parts, and we bought a whole bunch of tractor trailer parts. One of our I wanted that industrial steampunk look. Okay. I talked with one of our vendors. His name is Gumball Dave. He has the gumball machines in our business.
Yeah.
And he used to be a airplane mechanic for the major airlines.
Yeah.
So I was talking to him early on about, I wonder if I could buy parts of an airplane, like the outer skin. And he was the one that gave me the idea of it would be a lot easier if you could buy tractor trailer parts.
Sure.
Well, it turned out one of our staff members, she works for me part-time. Full-time, she works for PMF trailer down in Zeeland, Opal. So they introduced me to them, and we went down there and we started buying stuff, tractor trailer doors, tractor trailer sides, and then we crafted them into the door that goes from the back alley to the bowling center is a 13-foot wide door. I mean, you can't buy 13-foot wide doors. I mean, Lowe's was out of them that day, okay? And so, I mean, for a while there, my brother was mad at me, but basically he crafted a door out of 2 panels. Okay.
Super
and then
cool.
the doors that go from the 11th frame into the back alley, they are pocket doors. So most people don't even realize this, but when we're open, they're sort of slid into the wall.
Yeah.
But when they're closed, you're looking at the back end of a tractor trailer.
That's cool, man.
Okay, so we've taken a whole bunch of things. When the lanes themselves were there, so we decided to, you have to take out the gutters, and now you've got a 60-foot like trench, basically.
Right.
You have to fill in. Well, my son Blake, he'd never laid a floor before, but we bought this Ipe and Kumaru wood, which is like Brazilian walnut.
Yeah.
And most people like long boards. We only needed short boards.
Sure.
So the company that sold it to us was like as happy as a lark.
They can get rid of it.
Because nobody wanted short boards, and I was like buying up a whole bunch of these short boards. Well, Blake, he filled that in.
Yeah.
And then he and I took like a week to sand that floor, and that has to be, in my mind, the prettiest dance floor
Yeah.
in the county. Nobody has a floor like that.
Super
I mean,
cool.
for somebody that wants to do a wedding or something like that, there's nothing that can touch that.
Well, hey, I'll tell you, the events that I went to there were great. Yeah, man, you guys were just so hospitable, but like you guys, it was just very well done. Everything was going. People were doing bocce, duck pin. People were dancing. It was a party in there, so it was sweet.
Good.
And how cool that, you know, even the next generation, you and your son able to work on that. Like, it's been in your family for years, and what a cool legacy, man, that your family is leaving and continues, well, not leaving behind, but continues with in this county and in the lives of so many people. That's just awesome. So I can't thank you enough for coming in.
I just want to add one last thing.
Sure.
Is, you know, when we finished the back alley, we actually submitted pictures. There's a in the bowling industry, they have like an annual architectural award.
Cool, yeah.
Okay, and it's for centers all over the world. Okay, so last fall, we had a local photographer take, you know, some really nice high resolution pictures and so forth. We submitted those, and we actually won an international architectural award for that room. Okay. And that appeared in like the November issue. And then in another magazine, they got wind of it. They contacted us, and we were on the front cover of their December issue, of December of 2019.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was pretty cool, you know, that we've, you know, got some recognition for some stuff. And the, you know, people that have come through here that are in our business said they have never seen anything like what we did.
How cool is that? And again, all here in Butler, PA.
Yes.
If you don't know about it, where can people find your business?
Well, you can find us either under Family Bowlaway.
Yeah.
Okay. You can find us under the 11th Frame.
Mm-hmm.
You can find us now under the Back Alley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
And you can even take a virtual 3D tour.
Yes.
Through part of the building.
You can check out every part of it. Kevin, I cannot thank you enough, man. This was so intriguing, very interesting, and the legacy, again, that your family has here in Butler is awesome. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.